Hiya, pals! Welcome to the Mouse Bytes podcast! Here we go!
Hello, and welcome to Mouse Bytes, the show all about Disney video games, past and present, episode 20. I'm your host, Jeph, and I'm joined, as always, and as usual, and reliably, by my co-host, Clay. How you doing, man?
Good. Happy episode 20.
Happy episode 20. Can't believe we've made it to this little milestone.
Hey, it's a good milestone for us.
Yeah, that's great. When we started this, we weren't totally sure what direction we'd go and how frequently and all that, but it's great to have 20 under our belt and keep on working our way up.
Yeah, totally. We've definitely covered some games that I had never played and or heard of, so I feel much more knowledgeable than I did when we started, which I think is half the point of doing this show.
Totally.
So, including today was one that I'd never gotten my hands on, so I'm excited.
Yeah, same, and I'm excited as well to talk about it a little bit. And it's one I was sort of aware existed, but just sort of was like, it's whatever. But today's game is, in fact, Magical Tetris Challenge. Alrighty, so Magical Tetris Challenge, in case you didn't figure it out by the title, is a Tetris game.
Oh.
Yeah, we can kind of jump into our what the heck is this game if you want to start that off.
Yes, so Magical Tetris Challenge, known in Japan as Magical Tetris Challenge featuring Mickey. It's a puzzle game by Capcom for the Nintendo 64, Game Boy Color, and PlayStation. The PlayStation version was only released in Japan and Europe, not in the United States. So today we are covering the Nintendo 64 version. We won't really be talking about the other two. I think it also was in the arcade at one point.
Yeah, that's what I read. I'm not totally sure what that would have looked like.
Yeah, I haven't even seen a picture of it, but it was a Japan thing only because they always get the cool arcade games. So,
yeah,
but yeah, it's Tetris with Mickey characters. It's pretty straightforward. I don't know, the title's kind of weird. It really has zero reference to Disney, Mickey, whatever.
Yeah.
It's interesting that Japan threw it in, but we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, no, I would have called it Mickey's Magical Tetris Challenge or something like that. Like, I had a VHS when I was a kid called Mickey's Magical World, so it already existed as a known thing.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah. Let's see. It was developed, like I said, by Capcom. It released. The Nintendo 64 version released November 1998, North America January 1999, and then September 1999 for Europe. So
pretty
a little
standard
spread out,
for
but
N64 games, right?
Yeah, not
kind of
too
noticing
bad.
a trend on these releases on most of the ones we've done.
Yeah, and then it looks like the Game Boy Color was like almost a year later. That they came out. So we won't talk about that one much. Like I said, I did read that it's a bit different, so we probably won't ever cover it on the show, but if this sounds fun or you enjoy the N64 one, might be worth looking up the Game Boy Color one. So that being said, I didn't have any additional behind the scenes info. Jeph, did you have any history with this game?
I did not. It was one that I remember seeing ads for, maybe Nintendo Power, maybe a different gaming magazine or something. But I recognized the cover, and I feel like it was used as like a full screen print ad. Could be completely wrong with that, but I definitely recognize it. But I never played it, never had it. It's interesting at the time, and I think we'll probably. I don't know when else we'll discuss this, but at the time, 2D sprite games on the N64 weren't really the rage.
Oh yeah.
That's kind of a big interesting point about how this game has aged. But So I maybe avoided it because of that. I'd never gotten into Tetris by that point. I think I'd played it on like Windows 95 or something. I never had the Game Boy or NES ones originally. But yeah, either way, I didn't play it then. When I picked it up to play it for this show, though, I was actually really impressed with this game. So how about you? Any history or nostalgia for you?
No, unfortunately, never a game I owned. I played the original Tetris on the Game Boy back in the day, but outside of that, wasn't a huge Tetris guy. Okay. I've warmed up to it over the recent years, but I still suck at it, and it's not my favorite puzzle game. I know it's like the classic, and I appreciate it for what it is, but anyway, so I picked up a copy on eBay, relatively cheap for this episode. It was about time that I got my hands on a copy because I'm currently collecting for the N64, trying to get them all eventually, and so figured what the heck, might as well have this one. So yeah, so not much history, unfortunately. Kind of went in blind on this one, wasn't sure what to expect.
Yeah, I didn't know how much game was in here, what it was, how close it was to original Tetris and all that. So it was interesting to play through and find out. Real quick, have you ever played Tetris DS, the Nintendo one?
No.
Okay. That was my first Tetris game that I owned. It's like my favorite version of Tetris still to this day, and I highly recommend it. I think especially you as a big Nintendo fan would appreciate it. It's just sort of this like homage to Nintendo, like 8-bit Nintendo.
Oh, cool. It's like Mario art and stuff in it.
Yeah, it's real quick sidetrack just because I want to plug this game because it's like my favorite Tetris game.
Go for it.
Basically, it's because it's on the DS and Tetris, it wouldn't really work to divvy up the screen, just to have that gap in between. So you play on the bottom screen. It's pretty standard Tetris, but on the top screen, it will literally essentially show an AI playing through whatever the theme of that level is. So like the first one is like Mario World 1-1, and as you clear lines, it progresses Mario through the stage. And it's got like Zelda, and it's got Metroid and a bunch of other old properties, and it plays the music but remixed from each of those series, and it's just anyway, it's great. Everyone should check it out. If we ever for some reason have a show where we can review it, I would love to talk that game up. But
nice.
Anyway.
It looks cool. It looks real cool.
Yeah.
So is there like it looks like I see a classic Donkey Kong level from like the arcade.
I'm pretty sure. Yep, I'm pretty sure. They include
dope.
A bunch of old Nintendo properties, and it's got a bunch of different modes and attacks and like challenges, and it's a very deep game as well. Like, and we'll discuss this one this one's pretty simple and straightforward. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's an
Nice.
example of maybe the best way to do a Tetris game.
Right.
Anyway, with that, we can go ahead and jump into the gameplay discussion. I think we can go over some of the good and bad of this game. So, with that, we'll move over. Okay, so with the gameplay discussion, as always, we will discuss the visuals, the audio, the gameplay, and then the story elements, which this one at least does have some sort of attempt at a story. So,
Yeah.
Which again is pretty unique for a Tetris game. So, as far as I know, I don't know, maybe there's some other story Tetris games, but first off, the visuals, something I touched on at the top of the show, but yeah, this game essentially uses 2D assets 100%. I don't think there's any polygons in this game.
Yeah, the only ones that could potentially be would the things on the top of the Tetris games. They have like eyeballs.
Yeah, I can confirm by running it through an emulator that those were sprites.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, but they're the most 3D element of the game, and they're animated essentially like Donkey Kong Country. They're pre-rendered 3D objects.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Essentially, this game looks like a really, really good Super Nintendo game, and I love that.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
And I think that that's a strong point for it in today's day and age, where sprite games are equally as welcomed into the industry as 3D games. Yeah, it's got great colors, vibrant. The character models are pretty good. I think Donald looks just slightly off, but like in general, I think most of that is due to the resolution of the N64 and just making him read work properly, look right, probably on a 480, old TV. But I don't know. What did you think of the graphics?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I think the sprites, like for the cutscenes,
especially those.
Maybe not like the close-up ones where it's just like clearly artwork, but like when you select your character, they're like moving sprites that are standing there, and they look so good. And then in some of the cutscene parts, when you like walk up and talk to them, I don't know, and in the backgrounds of those parts too, just you're right, it totally looks like what would have been the next step after we got all those awesome Mickey and Donald, side scrollers from the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. And so like literally the first thing it kind of bummed me out, because I was like, man, like I wish they would have kept making those awesome games that they were making. But obviously fans were into 3D, and so that was not what they wanted.
Right.
But we got this, and I don't know. I think the sprites look really cool, and they're super detailed, good shading. There's like a ton of moving parts to them, and maybe that, they had more time to make that stuff do that, because that's really one of the only things they had to do was make them
no 3D modeling. Back. Yeah.
Right. And so, so it's kind of a bummer, because I feel like they could have made a really cool platformer with these graphics, but it probably would have not been very welcomed, just because everybody wanted 3D at the time.
Yep.
But so that being said, I really like it. I think the overall art style looks really good. The Tetris part itself is pretty straightforward. The blocks and stuff, there's nothing super unique about it. Nope. The different levels have different design to them, depending on the character and what their thing is. And so Goofy's got like the farm thing, Minnie's got baking,
kitchen,
in the kitchen. Donald has this like sailing and boating or fishing or something. Yep. Mickey works in a factory for some reason, and so
of course, classic job.
Why not? And so I don't know. I think they did a good job with those. The eyeballs on top of the Tetris things are a little weird.
Yeah.
But I guess they're just trying to give it some life, give it some vibrance or whatever. Yeah. So really, I think that's about it visually.
About as much as we can say about the visuals. Yep. There's a few visual effects, like when you fill up your magic meter, there's kind of like this rainbow moving texture, which is, again, a cool added thing that the N64 could do that probably would have been tricky to do on the older hardware, so that's cool.
Yeah.
It would have been, some of the sprites are big and animated, which is great, especially in the cutscenes. Again, stuff that like couldn't have been done on the Super Nintendo, I don't think. Right. At least without some really intensive like per line wizardry. But so overall though, it's just a good art direction and visual quality. So next, the audio, and this one I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, especially the music. Do you want to go ahead and start off with the music?
Holy cow, this music sucks.
Yes, it does. Okay, glad we're on the same page there.
Oh man, it's rough.
It's like 70s kind of Barry Manilow kind of other stuff that I don't want to say on the kids show sounding. Some weird bass lines and what do you call that guitar that's like
it's like funk guitar almost. There's Goofy's song, it sounds like it's straight out of like Tony Hawk Pro Skater. It's like rap, like gangster rap meets like random guitars thrown. I don't know. I don't know. I unfortunately in my room where I play most of my games, I have this speaker set up with it because, long story, basically the TV speaker doesn't work, so I've rewired another speaker to play it, but I can't control the volume on it, so there's just one volume control. It's just, and so this game was super loud when I was playing it. And even at one point, my wife came and like closed the door to our office. She was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna close this," and I'm like, "I can't blame you because I'm blaring this terrible music. I should have just went and turned it off." But anyway, it's just, I don't know. She probably thought, "What the heck is he doing in there?"
Right.
I promise I'm not watching anything weird, just playing Tetris. But
With Mickey Mouse.
yeah. So it just doesn't fit the source material at all, and I don't know. I always say like it doesn't have to be like clearly Mickey Mouse style music. Like you could go another route with it, but this just was not the route. Some points it's like the menu music is like salsa music,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden it goes in and like all of a sudden we have gangster rap like cowboy farmer music for Goofy.
Right.
Oh, it's just I don't know. I did not enjoy it.
So often in these games, I get another pattern I'm noticing is just the original compositions sometimes are just like, why did you do that? Why didn't you just go for some of the, go from some of the old 30s or 40s Mickey short music and, make a modern take on it. I don't know.
Right.
Like Turkey in the Straw would have been great for the barn, the Steamboat Willie song. And,
yeah,
it's copyright free and all that. So,
no, because, all these guys that made this music are, well, they're Capcom. So he's probably Japanese.
Definitely Japanese.
And he's like, I'm gonna do my own thing. I'm really gonna express myself in this game. It's like, no, man.
Which Capcom has done in all of the ones we've reviewed so far.
That's true. Yeah. There are some Capcom Disney games that have good soundtracks. We just haven't got to them, I guess.
Just wait till we get to DuckTales.
Yeah.
As far as the other sound, there's not a whole lot to it, but the standard Tetris line clear sounds and warning sounds when you get close to your last like 5 or 10 lines towards the top, and all that stuff's in there. Nothing stood out to me. I didn't find it to be obnoxious or anything. At your loud volume, were any of those sound effects stand out or overly annoying? Yeah.
Nah, they were fine.
Yeah. Trying to think if there's really any sound effects in the cutscenes. I feel like it was just music.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Excuse me, that's kind of annoying. There's no dialogue. I mean, it's all, you read all the dialogue, but
yeah,
they didn't add any noise to even the text popping up. It was just kind of music
a character
playing.
sound like, like Mickey. Something like
even that would have been cool. Yeah.
Whenever they switched characters, but like they could have done full voice acting on this. Like there's nothing else on this cartridge. It can't have, like, these assets cannot be that large file wise. Like obviously in the N64 days, cartridge space was expensive, and any corner you could cut, I'm sure you did. I'd be curious to play the PlayStation one, the European one or whatever,
right?
To see if there's any big differences or FMV or anything like that, or if it'll just be, straight port.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and I agree. I think any kind of additional sound effects to let you know who, because there were a couple times where I would like look away and then like look back up, and I'm like, wait, who's talking?
Yeah.
And then there's like these little wooden like tokens with their faces on it, like next to the dialogue.
Yeah.
That let you know who's talking, and I don't know. It's just, it all felt really lazy. I'm like, this was like they seriously drummed that up. Those cutscenes really quickly, and really the only thing that like changes in them is I think when Pete walks out, it goes from like the regular like music to this once again like gangster rap sound.
It reminded me a little bit of the Bowser music in Mario 3D World, but not quite. It was just sort of like that, trying to be intimidating and but
right. But yeah, so other than that, there really wasn't a whole lot of like. I don't know. They just dropped the sprites into these, pre-drawn backgrounds, and then they occasionally move, and then they have the text run up and down. It's like really, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting now that you're talking about that. Like the backgrounds could have probably pretty easily and pretty cheaply been done in 3D and had the camera kind of pan in and get you that like pseudo 3D effect with sprites. But I mean,
I don't know anything about game design, but this whole game just feels really phoned in. Like they had some people work on the sprites. They had some people like, all right, let's just get like the basic, Tetris formula. We'll shake it up a little bit and we'll print it and sell it. I don't know. Maybe they spent all their money licensing or something.
Probably, yeah. Who knows? But with that, we could probably jump over into the actual gameplay and
sure
go from there. So in this game, essentially, you play as one of 4 characters, Mickey, Donald, Goofy, or Minnie. Apparently in the Game Boy one, you can play as Pete, but not in this one. So, but interestingly enough, like, the actual core gameplay doesn't change with characters. I think it would have been really cool from a design standpoint to add some sort of special skill for each of the characters. I don't know what it would be.
Yeah.
Like Mickey could summon in, clear the bottom 4 lines at any time, and Goofy could just sort of like trip and fall, and then it shifts everything over to the left so that the right line is always empty. Something, I don't know, something like that. Like, you could have added a little something for each character, but instead each character is only there so that they can have 4 branching storylines which overlap, which we'll touch when we get to that point. But feels like a missed opportunity. So it's like character select doesn't really make a difference if you're just playing through the game once. If you're a completionist, you want to play as all 4, but then the order that they're given to you is like Mickey first, then Donald, whatever, but it's not the order that the story goes in, allegedly.
Right.
So, there's that. And it doesn't tell you what order to play them in. Like, that's something that's derived from reading the plot summary online. So, as far as actual Tetris gameplay, it is very standard, with the exception of so there's like 3 modes you can play. You've got magical Tetris, up-down Tetris, and then just endless mode. But like magical Tetris essentially adds in some variables to the block shapes. So there's like really giant, like, I don't know, 4x4 or 5x5 blocks or something, and then like weird shaped zigzag ones. And those come in, basically you've got a little meter you fill up and you attack your opponent, so you always play against the AI when you're in single player mode. And it's essentially you're trying to clear blocks. You get bonuses for the more lines you clear at once, so like 3 or 4 being a Tetris, you send over more blocks to your enemy. If you keep getting attacked, then those other shaped blocks will start showing up, and it kind of becomes more difficult, and you end up with some weird gaps, and then you pretty much lose pretty quickly. Up-down mode is classic Tetris, just pure and basic, like what you know and love. And endless mode, I can't remember if you choose which version or if it's just up-down in an infinite mode, which is pretty standard in most versions of Tetris. This game, I believe, was one of the very first ones to offer the ghost piece, which shows you where your piece is going to land. So it's up at the top as it's falling, but you can see the outline of it on the bottom, which is definitely standard now and a very welcome part of the modern Tetris formulas. So that's great. I know you said you're not like super into Tetris, so your perspective on this might be a little different, but what did you think overall of the gameplay and all that?
It was all right. I struggled, to be honest. I could not get very far. They give you some difficulty options when you pick, a mode. I think there's practice, normal, and hard. And so practice didn't sound like it was going to give me the full experience, so I went with normal. And I played it with all the characters. I could not get past the second person, whatever it was. Sometimes I would lose on the first one, and then I'd replay it, and then I'd win. But like every time I got to the second one, I could not beat it, and so I was a little frustrated. Yeah. And I know I suck at the game, but
no, real quick, I play Tetris a lot still. Like my wife and I play almost every day, actually. But I was struggling. The AI is really tough, and I was just playing on normal.
Okay,
so it's not.
That makes me feel better. Yeah. Yeah, and then I realized if you go to the options, there's an additional difficulty toggle.
Didn't go check that.
Yeah, and so I
weird.
Turned that to easy, and then was able to make it a bit further before I ended up losing. But by that point, when I finally got further, I had like kind of lost interest at that point. Yeah, and was kind of struggling to move on or want to move on. I do like the variation though. I understand like a lot of times people like the original Tetris, but I was more wanting to see what new there was, what they were offering that was new. And so there were a couple times where I was like, oh, it's nice, and there were a couple times where I found it a little annoying, like them making up these new piece shapes that I'd never seen before, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? Or
they're hard to fit in.
Right, or they throw those big like 5x5 ones or something, and I just got really frustrated. But so I enjoyed that part probably the most, just seeing kind of what they had come up with to change it up. So
okay, yeah. One thing I found interesting is like once you get into the single player mode, you're like locked into it. You can't exit to main menu. The pause screen has no options; it just says pause. Which is like, I don't know, I just feel like if I was playing, just hanging out, and then it's like my wife came in and wanted to join in, like we'd have to like reset the N64.
Yeah, that is weird.
Odd design choice, a very simplistic thing, quality of life thing that's just like, why would you do that? Also, I think for a game like this, it would have been nice to include a difficulty changer on the pause menu if you're struggling, like if you start playing and it's getting too hard, you have to reset your 64 and start over to change your difficulty, which is just dumb. I think that pretty much covers most of the gameplay. It's pretty simplistic overall. I do like the battle aspect, and that's again something that's pretty standard in modern Tetris multiplayer, where the more lines you clear, you quote unquote send them over to the other person, and it fills them up. This one, as it fills from the bottom, it always leaves the same line open. So if you can clear everything above that, you can just get vertical 4 pieces and clear it really quickly. In the more modern versions of Tetris, it is just a random single spot missing per line. As it fills up from the bottom. So like this one, if it picks the right vertical column, that will always be empty and you can clear it pretty quickly. Modern ones, it could be like the right one on this line, and the next line up could be like the next line over, and et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of hard to explain, but like it's a little different and trickier, and you can't clear it quite as quickly, but it I don't know. I like the modern way better, but that's kind of splitting hairs. I think that's pretty much it gameplay wise. And so with that, we can just touch upon the story of the game. Do you want to just give us a quick summary and
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So basically, like Jeph mentioned earlier, players can choose from one of 4 characters. Those characters being Mickey, Donald, Goofy, and Minnie. To play out the story, each character has a different storyline, all of which connected together, with Goofy and Donald's stories taking place first, Minnie's story taking place a little later, and Mickey's story taking place last. And each character's story, they play a round of Tetris against each other. Other players, fighting other characters, including Pete and his henchmen, which those include a weasel, like from the ones after The Wind in the Willows, and then the Big Bad Wolf, which honestly, the 3 of them, Pete, Weasel, and Big Bad Wolf, are probably my favorite part of this game. I just thought it was a really cool little posse for him to have. Like, we've seen, the weasels in games past, but this is one of the first times I've seen Big Bad Wolf, in his, top hat form with the suspenders or whatever. I don't know. I've always really liked his character, art direction, style, whatever. And so I thought that was kind of neat. So, yeah,
I was going to comment on that as well, that the Big Bad Wolf is pretty underrepresented in most modern Disney. They do use him a lot in the theme parks, and I know that from my time there. He's in most of the parades I worked, which is cool. But it's like, I don't know that most kids know him from the Disney cartoon. I don't know that most kids know the Disney version of the 3 Little Pigs.
Right.
But it's cool that they included him. And the weasels, like you said, they've been reused in a lot of different things. They were in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. They were in Mickey Speedway USA that we covered before.
That's right.
They've for some reason become these like gangster weasels, and weasels are just sort of like, it's a negative connotation, so people are like, oh, you weasel, it's a bad thing. So like I guess that's why Disney loves to use them, or maybe just the Capcom dudes really liked them.
And Conquer.
Yeah, I know. It's that one is, interestingly enough, very similar to the Disney one.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that was on purpose or not. I actually kind of want to ask Chris Seaver about that now.
You should.
Or someone else from that team. But
yeah.
Story-wise, it's interesting, like I mentioned at the top of the show, that doesn't, like, even though there's some sort of chronological order to the character stories, the game doesn't really present them to you in that way. Like, it would have been cool if you only could play as Donald or Goofy first, and then you unlocked Minnie, and then you unlocked Mickey. And I get it, like, you probably don't want to not have Mickey available from the get-go because people want to play as Mickey. But again, if you're going to do this sort of progressive story where they overlap and you know, the outcome of Donald and Goofy's story then moves into the beginning of Minnie's story, and then the outcome of her story overlaps into Mickey's. Like, why would you just put a character select screen with them in a random order and no implication whatsoever? Again, like you said, it just seemed like they phoned in the story mode and the cutscenes and all that. But yeah, essentially it's like Donald's fishing and he finds this magic gem and a piece of it falls off that Goofy ends up with, and then the weasels or Pete ends up getting the glow from the stone, even though you win as Donald. Donald keeps his gem, makes it into some sort of, I don't know, they all make it into like a necklace or a locket or something. I don't know. It's really silly, which again, most of these Disney game plots have been, so it's not like we were expecting a grand, epic, deeply thought out thing. But yeah, and then ultimately Mickey saves the day and beats Pete and everybody and gets everybody their gems back. I actually that's maybe the part I didn't get to because I didn't play through to the very end, but it looks like Pete was trying to use the gem's power for some sort of evil, and then he tries to use the power against Mickey and it backfires and sucks him into a vortex. So, you know, that old chestnut.
Yeah, and I'm watching the end of the Donald one. And basically, Pete gives Donald his stone back, and it says, Donald, happy to get his stone back, heads for home. And then it rolls the credits, and that's the end of that storyline.
Good game.
Yeah, it's a little weird. Some of the dialogue is really strange, and like, I understand that you got to like set up the gameplay somehow, but it's like, hey, you're at Minnie's house. Why don't you change your clothes, which she says, and help me do some baking.
Can't bake in your regular clothes. No way.
Right. You got to put on this silly chef outfit. And then it's like you destroy her in Tetris, and then she goes, thanks for the help. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
I just destroyed you.
See, and that's another thing they could have done is added in like per level elements. Like the cookies could have cleared a line. Like just so many missed opportunities.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's just some of the dialogue felt really weird. Like, well, I don't need all of this diamond that I found. Here, Goofy, have a piece.
Have a chunk
and
of
then
it.
And then he just leaves, and you're like, okay. So yeah, I appreciate that there is a storyline because it's literally the only thing I feel like, other than maybe, you know, slight variation of gameplay, that sets this apart from other Tetris. And you know, they worked hard, or at least paid decent money to get the IP, and so having a storyline is a no-brainer. But yeah, for as little as this game offers, and the fact that they went with the let's have multiple branching storylines, which I think is a cool idea.
Totally.
I just feel like they missed the mark a lot.
Yeah.
So
no, and there's some just silliness to like why they're playing Tetris. Was like at the beginning of the Goofy cutscene, he's kind of like a zombie. He's under Pete's or somebody's mind control.
That's right.
And he's like, I have to defend this, but first we have to play Tetris. I was like, oh, okay.
Totally.
So yeah, it is what it is. It's a Disney video game plot that again could have probably been a little bit cooler and could have been presented in a little bit better way to make it flow from storyline to storyline. But yeah, it's there. It's got the cutscenes and it gives a Disney element. Lastly, the levels, I think we kind of talked about those in the graphical settings anyway. There's not anything else that much more to them, where they each kind of have a cutscene background that's pretty nice looking, and then just sort of a background while you're playing, and like you said, that animated thing up at the top of the Tetris play field.
Right.
I don't know, did you want to touch any more on those, or you think we covered them?
No, I think pretty much every character has their own level, and then I'm not sure if Pete has his own level or if he just shows up to other people's, not a lot of variety, but it's Tetris. What do you expect? So,
Yeah. Well, with that, I think we're probably pretty good to move into our final thoughts, which they're probably pretty close to what we've just mentioned. So, go ahead with yours.
All right. Well, starting off, this is one of those games that you have to move through the menus with the D-pad, by the way.
That is something to mention. Yeah, it's one of the few games you hold the N64 controller in the outside prongs.
Right. I think the only other one that I can think of that does that is like Cruise in USA. But I'm sure there's more, but I don't know.
I'm sure.
So that already, right off the bat, I was like, I don't know what I think about this game, because that always kind of puts a bad taste in my mouth. I love the D-pad on it, don't get me wrong.
You can only play Tetris on a D-pad, so take it as a blessing.
And so, yeah, I agree. So they probably, dodged a bullet not using the joystick on this one. But no, final thought-wise, it's... I don't know. I'm not a great judge of Tetris games, so I feel a little ill-equipped to speak on that end. But I guess on the Disney end of it, it's still lacking a lot. Because, for people like me that show up more for the Disney side of it, rather than like the Tetris side, it was a little, a bit of a, I don't know. I felt it was lacking. It is nice that it at least offers 2-player, so there is that. Like I said, I enjoy that I like that they made multiple different storylines that interact in their own ways. You get to see a character's like, oh, this is what they were doing when I passed them earlier or whatever. I think that's cool. The storyline itself, though, was a little... I don't know, not as good. The way the game comes to you packaged, ready to go, it's way too difficult, at least for someone like me.
Yeah.
And Jeph, you said you struggled and you've played more Tetris than I have. And so a little frustrating. I guess, obviously, you want it to be challenging. So at least there's the option to increase your difficulties and stuff. Because if you play this enough, you get really good.
Yeah.
Music is terrible. Visuals are great. And I think that's my final thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, my analysis of it is fairly similar. Just the other perspective being that I love Tetris and thought that this was a very well executed basic Tetris game, especially on the up-down mode. One of the modern staples of Tetris is holding, having a hold box on the left side of the screen, so that you can kind of, if there's a piece that you don't want to use right now, you can kind of stick it and save it for a move down the road and swap it out. That's really the only modern Tetris element that's missing, and so it's other than that, it's pretty good core Tetris game. The new blocks, I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't like most variations on Tetris because a lot of them are just done for the sake of changing it, and Tetris is such a great puzzle game on its own merits that it really just doesn't need the changes, but I understand the desire to want to find something to kind of spice it up because it is the same thing every time you get a new Tetris game. So the back and forth element as far as the competitive mode, don't know how often or if that had been done before this game, but that is pretty standard nowadays for multiplayer Tetris. So that's fun. It's a lot better than just saying like who can clear 150 lines first. It's it kind of gives you that strategic element to save up and send a Tetris over to your enemy, your buddy, your second player. Like, totally agree that the graphics are great. The music is awful. Yeah, it's and I'm glad that they were bold enough to just stick to 2D sprites back then, and some reviews we looked up, the game took a lot of crap for it back then. People complained that it wasn't 3D in a 3D era, but I think that that's to the game's benefit in this day and age, and has aged far better than most N64 games visually. So that's pretty much it. With that, I think we'll wrap up. So thank you all for joining us, as always. Give us a follow on Twitter if you haven't. We're at mouse_bytes. And again, bytes is like the digital term, BYTES. You can always find us on www.thenintendovillage.com, where you can find links to all of our other episodes, some other shows, reviews, and other content. And you can find visual versions of our shows on the Nintendo Village YouTube page if you're listening to this, or if you're watching this on the YouTube page. You can always find us on your favorite podcasting app as well. tune in for our next episode, which is Pixar Rush, a more modern game. And with that, have a great day, everybody.
See ya.
And remember, protect your jewels from cats, weasels, and wolves.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, check out some of our other videos, and visit thenintendovillage.com, your home for everything Nintendo.